Science, December 24th, Christmas Eve. They reported an amazing preservation of the bones of a young duck-billed dinosaur found in Montana. Under the microscope, the fine structure of the bones was seen to have been preserved to such an extent that the cell characteristics could be compared with cells of chicken bone. 1961, in northwest Alaska, they found a bed of dinosaur bones that were unpermineralized. That means not fossilized. That is from Journal of Paleontology, 1986-87. In Omni magazine, January of 1990, they talk about on the banks of the river in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, frozen dinosaur bones were found that are as light as balsa wood and look as fresh as yesterday's dog bones. The structure was porous and the fossils were not mineralized. On Bylot Island, 1987, they found the lower jaw of a duck-billed dinosaur that was in fresh condition. Joe Taylor, who does a lot of digging for dinosaurs in Texas, in Crosbyton, Texas, outside of Lubbock, has discovered many times, he said he finds dinosaur bones that are not fossilized. So the idea that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago is silly. So, next question. If there really was a flood, where are all the human bones? People say, oh, if the world was totally destroyed, they ought to find millions of human fossils. Well, about 4,000 human remains have been found, according to Marvin Lubenow, who's one of the smartest guys I know on the topic of human ancestors. You know, his book Bones of Contention is excellent from the Christian perspective on all the so-called cavemen that they're finding. Many of the human remains, even those are very fragmentary, just one bone or just a few bones, but let's assume 4,000 human remains have been found, just to pick a number. I think when God made the earth 6,000 years ago, it was full of plants, full of animals, and only 2 people. 4,400 years later, when the flood, or 1,600 years later when the flood came, the world is still full of plants and still full of animals and still not full of people. I'm not sure what the population was. I would pick a number clear out of the clear blue sky and say, let's assume there was 1 billion people at the time of the flood. Could may have been a lot more. If they had 100 kids per family, populations grow quickly like that. But let's say that it was a population of 1 billion. It may have been 10 billion. I don't think there's any way to tell. Okay. Problem is, they all died except for Noah and his family. So, 1,600 years and 1,650 years after the creation, you still don't have the world full of people yet. The purpose of the flood was to destroy man off the earth, Genesis chapter 6 and verse 7. The Bible also says there were giants in the earth in those days, men of renown, mighty men, big people. Here's a picture we use on seminar part 2 about the human thumb bone on top compared with a giant human thumb bone underneath, found right near Mount Ararat. Here's the reasons I would give why so few human fossils have been found. Number one, there were less animals to be killed, less people to be killed than there were animals. Okay, so you're more likely to find animal bones than human bones, simply because there were more of them. Okay, God only made 2 people, but He made a world full of animals. Secondly, people are smarter than animals. Well, some people anyway. And so they would tend to avoid drowning until last, and they end up on top. So they end up rotting instead of being buried. In order to fossilize, the animal has to be buried. So I think you're more likely to find animal fossils than human fossils for this reason also. Thirdly, if humans were bigger, the bones might not be recognized as human. Because many people go into this study with a preconceived idea that evolution is true and man used to be small and we're getting bigger and better and stronger and smarter, and probably exactly the opposite is true. If people were 8 or 9 or 10 feet tall before the flood, and you found human bones from somebody 8 or 9 or 10 feet tall, like this thigh bone here over my head, which is from a human that would have been nearly 13 feet tall. We cover that on video number 3 about or video 2, I guess, about the giant people. That would have been a 13-foot human. Well, if just a fragment of that bone was found, nobody would dream it came from a human, if they believed in evolution, because they've got stuck in their head, man used to be like a chimpanzee, you know, 3 feet tall, and now we're 6 feet tall. And so they would assign it to something else. They would call it a cave bear or a giant sloth or something. Okay, it can't be human. That they would know for sure. So I think many bones are misidentified for that reason, because of the preconceived evolutionary concept, which is a great hindrance to scientific research. Next question. Where did Noah get pitch? In my debate number 7 with an atheist that was a former preacher, a Church of Christ preacher turned atheist, he said Noah couldn't make pitch because pitch is made from oil, and oil formed during the flood. Well, there's a problem with that. Several problems with that. Genesis chapter 6. God said to Noah to make the ark with gopher wood and pitch it with pitch within and without. Obviously, he's going to pitch it before the flood comes, so he's not going to make it out of oil that are made from creatures that drowned in the flood. Exodus 2 talks about Pharaoh's daughter drawing Moses from a basket that was daubed with pitch. They covered it with pitch. Well, what is pitch anyway? Isaiah 34 talks about pitch. It says burning pitch, and it puts off a smoke. Here we learn a few things about pitch. If you get a dictionary from 1828, Webster's Dictionary, 1828, you'll notice you can look up the word pitch. And by the way, 1828 is before oil was used commercially. I think the first oil well was drilled in Pennsylvania about 1830s or 40s maybe. I don't remember the date. But certainly there were no oil wells that we know of before that. So they weren't drilling into the ground to get oil, and yet they were making pitch in 1828. It's in the dictionary. It says, pitch is a thick, tenacious substance, the juice of a species of pine or fir. It's made from pine trees. It's the juice, the sap of a tree. Its second definition says it's the resin of pine or turpentine. It's used in caulking ships and paying the sides and bottom. That's to waterproof the boats. So they were pitch industries. They were whole factories. They produced pitch. They put it in barrels and they would sell it to ship-making companies who would cover their... It's basically like a tar substance, but it's made from the sap of trees. So no, don't tell me the Bible's wrong because it says they used pitch before the flood. The Bible is absolutely correct, and the skeptics are wrong. Okay, next question. Was ancient man primitive? Some people get this false idea that modern man is smart and everybody in the past was dumb. That's ridiculous. There's a lot of indication ancient man was extremely smart. There's an excellent book we sell called The Puzzle of Ancient Man by Don Chittick. Highly recommend this one. It's about $10, showing some of the incredible achievements of ancient man. Before the flood came, the Bible says the people lived to be over 900 years old. You could learn a lot in 900 years. Plus, when you consider a couple other factors, they lived in a perfect environment. They would have had much higher IQs, much less to do as far as just daily things you have to do just to live. Most of those things are taken care of in the Garden of Eden. Don't need a house. You got perfect weather. So they can devote all their time to study or learning things. Plus, Adam came pre-programmed from the hand of God. Probably had an incredibly high IQ. And he got to walk and talk with God for a while till he sinned, maybe 100 years, we don't know. But got to walk and talk with God. The other factor to consider is Adam lived long enough to know his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson. Noah's daddy could have known Adam for 56 years. So you get not only a much higher starting point, they already knew a lot because God pre-programmed it into Adam. Plus they lived a long time and could learn a lot more. Plus they lived long enough to pass this on to many generations. Today, an awful lot of knowledge goes to the grave. You know, about the time you know it all, you die. Or by the time you know a bunch of stuff, you die. Imagine if guys like Einstein could live, 800 or 900 years. How much knowledge could they accumulate in a brain like that? So, I think before the flood, they were much smarter than we are today. And some of this knowledge was passed down, and as lifespans got shorter, it began to be lost. And a lot of societies were arranged to try to, secret societies to preserve this knowledge, through different cultures and things like that. But they opened up a grave in South America. The grave was probably made about 1,000 years ago and found this little gold artifact in there. You can see it next to the dime for scale. Looks like an airplane about this big. The Smithsonian has it, and they have it labeled as a stylized insect. Because they got this preconceived idea, ancient man was dumb, modern man is smart, they could not possibly have known about airplanes 1,000 years ago. And yet, here they've got one. That's not a stylized insect. I'm sorry, they knew about flight. An Egyptian tomb was opened that's 2,100 years old, and it also had an airplane in it, a little model glider. How did they know about airplanes over 2,000 years ago? This iron pot found in a lump of coal indicates a high level of technology before coal formed. I believe coal formed in the flood in the days of Noah, so an iron pot is not a problem. The Bible says Tubal-Cain was an artificer in brass and iron. Some of the walls that are found in Peru, of these giant stone walls, have these massive blocks of stone that are cut and they fit together perfectly. One of the stones in one of these walls weighs 20,000 tons. Well, the biggest crane on earth today can only lift 3,000 tons. How on earth were they lifting a stone 20,000 tons? We simply don't know how they did it. Actually, in the book Secret of the Lost Races, the author said, what's truly impossible about the block is that it's the size of a 5-story house and weighs an estimated 20,000 tons. He said, we have no combination of machinery today that could dislodge such a weight, let alone move it any distance. It shows their mastery of a technology that we, as yet, have not attained. Somebody in the past knew something we can't even do today, and I think that's the case with a lot of things. This brass bell type thing was found inside a lump of coal. Mr. Newton Anderson has it sitting on his desk. I've talked to him many times about it. I think you ought to donate it to our museum here, Mr. Anderson. We'd keep it safe for you, I'm sure. But kids could come by and see it here. We'd love to have that. By the way, if you have any artifacts for our museum, we'd love to get anything. We want to influence people for the Lord. So if it's sitting in your closet gathering dust, you can put it on loan or give it to us or buy it off you if we can afford it. So that's the kind of things we have here. We want to get the gospel out. This vase found in solid rock, supposed to be 600,000 years old. Ancient man was 600 million years old. Ancient man was not primitive. They found a sunken ship in the Aegean Sea, which is near Greece in the Mediterranean. And there was encrusted on there what appeared to be an analog computing device. The more they analyze this thing, it's now in the National Science